Hi, I am Catherine Moore, and I wanted to share a recording that I came across the other day of a conversation I had with my mother on October 2nd of 2016. And it's not a conversation I really shared much. And this was a conversation I had with her before she passed away in 2018. This was right after my divorce. My mother sided with my ex-husband after our divorce because she had more to gain in having a relationship with my ex-husband than having a relationship with me. Because in her eyes, if she could get food from him and loiter at his home, and since he hated me, she had far more to gain and had far more in common with Carl Edward Anthony. And my mother was graced out, and her husband, who unfortunately is partially responsible for my existence. I'm sure they regretted that later. And his name was John Chester Dowden. And my father, before he passed away, was on disability through the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Denomination in Houston, Texas. My father was a child molester, and my mother assisted him. However, they were not the only couple under the Texas Annual Conference Administration that were involved in grooming a young girl and sexually abusing her. There was another pastor that was employed under the Texas Annual Conference Administration, and his name was Kendall Graham. And the victim that he groomed and sexually assaulted, she's listed as Jane Doe in a KHOU article. I have the documents that reveal her real identity that were leaked in my paperwork by Harrison Fisher. Harrison Fisher had told me that the Texas Annual Conference would come for my mental health, that they would tell everyone, that, including the family court system, which I didn't understand until it happened, that I was mentally ill and that I was not fit to take care of our kids. Which, would make sense since the Texas Annual Conference has a history of employing child molesters and child abusers, and actually one of them murdered his wife. So it would make sense that the Texas Annual Conference would think that my ex-husband would be a better parent, since they did not have a problem with supporting clergy who were child abusers and employing them. And it would make sense because the Texas Annual Conference is all about discrediting their victims and keeping their victims silent any way that they can, even if one of their victims ends up murdered by her abuser in a Methodist parsonage in Troop, Texas. So I am going to play this recording, and I'm going to stop it and explain and point out my mother's lies and why she is giving the response that she is giving. My mother was not prepared for this conversation. She did not know I was recording her. The reason why I recorded her was because no one heard what she really sounded like whenever I spoke with her. And I wanted to capture that because I wanted people to know the truth about my parents and what they were really like.
I'd like to know, one, were you in a psychiatric hospital when I was little? Did you check yourself there?
Yes, depression.
Why? Were you suicidal?
No,
Then why'd you go to a psychiatric hospital?
because I thought that was the best place for me.
Okay, so I would like to cover her response, explain she was lying because a psych ward is not going to take you if you show up and you say, well, I just think that this is the best place for me right now. They're going to think, well, it might be, considering the way you're responding. But they're not going to take you just because you feel it's the best place for you. If you feel it's the best place for you because you're afraid you might harm somebody, then yeah, they'll take you. If you feel it's the best place for you because you want to off yourself, or you just don't want to die, but you really don't want to off yourself, they may think it's the best place for you. But her response was bullshit, and she was not telling the whole truth. There's no way she could have been. Because they won't take you just because you're depressed. There has to be a more valid reason on why you will be admitted as an inpatient in a psychiatric unit. And I went to a psychiatric unit myself. I checked myself in. I had no desire to harm anybody. I cannot imagine physically harming anybody. And I would rather die than put another child through what my parents put me through. And I would rather die than put a child through what my ex-husband is putting our sons through. And I went because I had been through severe repeated trauma. I have not shared everything I have been exposed to or have witnessed. I have not only experienced my own trauma, but I have experienced trauma in other families. And one of them, which I will not mention names, there was a minister who was sentenced to 18 years in prison in one of the towns that I lived in. And he was sentenced to 18 years in prison because he was convicted, a convicted child abuser. And I watched his entire family collapse to the floor. And when they were strategic in who they were going to release out of that courtroom that day. And I had to stay behind while other people left. So I ended up in the room with the man that was convicted. I ended up in the room with his mother. His mother was doubled over sobbing in a chair. And I sat there and comforted her. It was just one of those moments where I did what was instinctual. And despite his conviction, I knew that his family did not deserve to go through what they were going through. And that his family, innocent people in his family, were paying a price for his mistakes. And I knew him personally, but I never had any uncomfortable interactions with him. And I'm thankful for that. However, despite my experience, just because someone else, it doesn't mean that because I didn't have a good experience with him, that someone else's experience was not relevant. My interaction with someone does not determine someone else's experience. And that is what I've learned about trauma and abuse. I sat there with his mother because what I saw was a mother that was devastated. So I can tell you from what I have witnessed that abuse affects everybody. And even the people who may share some responsibility in supporting a person who was involved and child abuse, they feel the pain as well. And even though I knew the family personally, I felt empathy for both sides, the girls who came forward, and I felt empathy for his family. And it was unlike anything I had ever seen at the time. I was in my early 20s. I also spoke with his father after the trial, after he was convicted. And his father was absolutely devastated. And there are many people that are affected when allegations of abuse are exposed inside the courtroom and outside the courtroom. My mother also said that she was in the psych ward because of depression. So, psychiatric units will not just take you in because you're depressed. That can easily be treated with a therapist and also a psychiatrist. So they're not necessarily going to admit you because you are depressed. My mother was not telling the whole truth. I know this because there's no way she could have been, because she was a very sick and demented woman. And I recorded these conversations because I wanted people to hear the contempt that she had for me and the lack of remorse that she had for drugging me with codeine so that I would not know that John Chester Dowden, her husband, who was a United Methodist minister that was also employed under the Texas Annual Conference Administration, was sexually abusing me. During the time that my mother was giving me the codeine, we were living in Groom, Texas, and my father was employed under the Northwest Texas Conference. They're under a different name now because they share, this conference is shared between people in up around the Panhandle and also in New Mexico. And it was in the mid-'80s that my father transferred and became employed under the Texas Annual Conference Administration in Houston, Texas, up until around 2000. And then around 2000, he went on disability through the Texas Annual Conference Administration in Houston with the United Methodist denomination in Houston.
Why were you giving me codeine when you knew it made me sick?
The doctor told me you would cry at night, your legs hurt, and I would give you Tylenol, and we didn't realize that's what was wrong with you, that the codeine was making you sick.
Okay, in this response, she is contradicting herself. And at first she says she was giving me Tylenol because she couldn't keep her facts straight, obviously. And because my question was I was directly asking her, why were you giving me the codeine when you knew it made me sick? So she starts off with saying she was giving me the Tylenol and my legs were hurting. And then she said, she changes her story and contradicts herself and says, well, we didn't know the codeine was making you sick. Oh, wait a second. Okay, I thought you said you were giving me Tylenol. So you weren't giving me codeine, you were giving me Tylenol. Oh, but now you didn't know that the codeine was making me sick. So which is it? She didn't think I would catch on to that. And she didn't think I would record her lies. And now everyone gets to hear how pathetic she was. And this is who Carl Edward Anthony thinks is wonderful, or was wonderful around their kids when she was alive. This is the kind of woman who would lie about giving me codeine so that my father could sexually abuse me, that Carl Edward Anthony would allow around our kids. And the kind of woman who would be married to a United Methodist minister that would be cared for and supported by the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Church in Houston, Texas. I'm happy for everyone to see my face when I play this recording. I want people to see that I can face what happened to me and I can own it. I have far more courage than my mother ever gave me credit for. And I can face what happened to me and I can own it. And I can face adversity. And I can go through hell and I can come out on the other side better than ever.
And you're lying. I remember that's not what happened. Well, tell me what happened. I guess you didn't think I would remember, did you? Tell me what happened. And I don't remember. You were giving me codeine. I was so drugged. I didn't know what was going on. I knew that you were giving me medicine that kept making me sick. You put it in ice cream. And you fed the ice cream to me.
Okay. So my mother really didn't know what to say. She was caught off guard. And this was the first conversation that I recorded where I was confronting her. So she was not prepared. She thought she got away with it scot-free, but not quite, because I called her fat ass out on it. And she was proud of what she got away with. She knew she got away with it. She knew that she couldn't be touched legally. Nobody would do anything to her because of the statute of limitations. And my mother called and harassed me up until she passed away. And she called me just before she passed away, asked me to come and take care of her. As if I was really going to just drop everything, put my entire life on hold for a woman who admitted to drugging me with codeine so that my father could sexually assault me. And so my response to her was, well, you told everybody that I have emotional problems. You told everyone that I'm mentally ill, so I'm not really in the state of mind to come and take care of your ass. How could I possibly be mentally well enough and coherent to come and take care of you? And she had nothing to say. And she believed her own lies. She was a woman who believed her own delusions. And for some reason, people fell for it. I think there were some people that thought there was something wrong with her and suspected something, but they just couldn't quite put their finger on it. I can detect a predator if they're sitting right next to me. I recognize red flags in people. And I recognized red flags in my ex-husband before I married him. But I married him because abuse is all I had ever known. So I did not know anything different.
thrown it up, and you were so determined to get that medicine down me.
Also, when she would give me the codeine, I would not be able to keep anything down. I was lethargic from not being able to keep anything down, from vomiting so much because of the codeine. I was also lethargic from the sedation of the codeine. And I do remember 2 separate occasions where she gave me the codeine. And one of the cases, I do talk about her in multiple recorded conversations about the fact that she used, at the time, when I was that age, my favorite ice cream was strawberry ice cream. And my mother knew that, so did my dad. And they needed the perfect victim to cooperate. So they went over to the neighbor's house and got strawberry ice cream, because I had already thrown up the codeine. But what does my mother do? She goes over to the neighbor's house, gets strawberry ice cream in a bowl from their house. I don't know, maybe, God only knows why she told them. And she spikes the ice cream with codeine, because that bitch just needed to get that damn codeine down me. She was desperate. And I remember they were getting ready to sell the house in Amarillo. And I was sitting on the bed in my dad's lap. And my mother was sitting there with a bowl of ice cream, feeding me the ice cream. And it didn't taste right. I could taste the codeine. But there was nothing I could do. I saw the look on her face. I heard the tone in her voice. I could hear the determination in her voice. And I was sitting in my dad's lap because she was preparing me so that I would be sedated, so I would know what my father was going to do to me once I became sedated from the codeine. And anytime I would throw the codeine up, she would just give me more. That's why I was so lethargic. And I remember she was determined. She just kept feeding it to me. There was just this dark, mellow tone in her voice. And her eyes were blank. Like she was just determined to make sure I was knocked the fuck out with that ice cream with the codeine in it. I'll continue with, and what happened after that, I have no idea. I have no memory after that. My memory stops after that. And these are the kind of people that the Texas Annual Conference Administration in Houston, the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Denomination in Houston, likes to employ and place on assignment in their churches. These are the kind of people that the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Denomination in Houston likes to have around their children.
Every day you give me medicine. Guys, what was the reason? How can somebody spent time in a psychiatric hospital and you think people are going to take you more serious? Do you think people...
And here is where I'm bringing up the fact that she spent time in a psych ward. She spent time in a psychiatric unit. And she somehow thinks that people are going to see her as more credible than myself. I spent time in a psych unit. Absolutely I did. I mean, that's where she wanted me. That's where my mother wanted me. That's where my ex-husband wanted me. Because they thought it was going to silence me, and it didn't. And I was telling the same damn story about what happened to me. And even Harrison Fisher, when I spoke with him, he said that the Texas Annual Conference, as if they're experts on who a fit parent is, after having a history of employing child molesters and placing them on assignment in their churches. Because the Texas Annual Conference knows a lot about fit parents, don't they? And my mother has the audacity to think that people are going to think she's credible, despite the fact that she has a diagnosed mental illness. So who's more credible? The perpetrator with a mental illness, or someone who has survived horrific abuse and has a mental illness because of that horrific abuse that they went through? Who's more credible? My strength is that I can tell my story without being afraid. Because I've already lost everything. I have a wonderful husband now, and he is supportive. And for the first time in my life, regardless of if I deserve it, and regardless of who thinks I may not deserve it, I know what real love is like, and I know what real love feels like. And I am thankful for that. And for the first time in my life, I have somebody in my corner that I can trust, that will stick beside me through thick and thin, no matter what. And I am thankful for that.
We're going to think you're more credible. What about that room that we were in? There were medical professionals there. They were telling you I had been molested. I guess you didn't think I remembered that, did you?
Okay, so I went through medical trauma as well. Oh, because this gets even better. Aside from the fact that my dad was a child molester, it just keeps getting better. And that's sarcasm coming from me, because that's how I deal with it. I can be abrasive with this, and I tell it like it is, because I'm not interested in candy coating anything that I went through. I did go through medical trauma, and it was because of my parents. And I have a theory what happened, and it was trauma. Actually, the medical trauma was because of medical issues that were created because of sexual abuse by my father, because I was a little girl. And I'm sure that many of you, especially adults with the knowledge of the birds and the bees, have a pretty good idea of the damage that can be done to a little girl from sexual assault by an adult male, especially one that is sedated and doesn't have a clue what the hell is going on. And there were physicians that would come in and talk to my parents, and they would talk about me like I wasn't in the room. I remember I saw them come in. They would just smile at me as if somehow, I guess just smiling at you just makes everything okay, right? I mean, who cares if you're in a hospital bed and you're there because of your parents and the abuse you're going through? They can just smile at you, and, because they're so arrogant, that just makes everything okay, because, oh my God, These physicians, they're standing there talking about me, but they just smiled about me. They just smiled at me, I mean. And there was a specific day that we were in a conference room. My eyes are getting fatigued because I've been on a blood sugar roller coaster ride where it gets elevated or it goes low. And I am in the process of addressing that. I'm dealing with diabetes and reactive hypoglycemia. And we were in a conference room, my parents and I, with multiple medical professionals. As far as which was a doctor or a psychiatrist or psychologist, I don't know. But I remember walking around the room, and I remember them talking about me, you know, because I'm just so fascinating, I guess. And I did not know at the time, because clearly I was too young to understand, that the reason why those medical professionals were meeting with my parents in a conference room was because they suspected that I had been sexually abused. Probably because of trauma, physiological trauma, because I was a little girl. I will let you figure the rest out with your imaginations. And my parents denied it. Of course, CPS was never contacted, because why would they if it's me? I mean, somebody else who goes through abuse, they need to contact CPS, but if it's me, no. Who gives a shit? But CPS was never contacted. Also, this was back in the 80s when a lot of people, including medical professionals, had their heads up their asses. And unfortunately, my parents were never investigated. And my parents also went through adoption classes because they wanted to adopt more kids. And eventually my parents tried to adopt 3 girls when I was 14, while my father was employed under the Texas Annual Conference with the United Methodist denomination in Houston. And they sent those 3 girls, April Dawn Strong, Tiffany Ann Wright, and Rosemary Wright, stayed with us until my father persuaded my mother to send them back to the foster home. He didn't want them anymore. Why? Why did John Chester Dowden, who was employed under the Texas Annual Conference Administration with the United Methodist denomination in Houston, not want April, Tiffany, and Rose anymore? April was 8, Tiffany was 5, Rose was 4. Why did he not want those precious little girls anymore? Because they were beginning to talk. And he couldn't afford for his dirty little secrets to get out. And I saw him touch them in the way that he touched me, and it bothered me, and I couldn't tell you why. I was 14, something about it bothered me, and I just couldn't. I had too much suppressed. And it took me decades to figure out what had happened and why my parents came to the decision that they came to in sending those 3 girls back, because they could not afford for their dirty little secret to get out that they were child predators. That my mother assisted my father in making it easier for him to sexually abuse those girls and to sexually abuse me.
So a medical professional sitting there. Why wasn't CPS contacted? Legally, CPS should have been contacted. I remember that. didn't think I remembered that. I remember a day in Groom you gave me codeine. I was so sick. I was so weak from throwing up repeatedly. And you gave me more. I remember there was a parade that day. I was too sick to go to the parade because you kept giving me codeine. I remember I was very sick from throwing up. I was so weak from throwing up all the time because you kept giving me codeine. And I remember I couldn't go to the parade that day because I was too weak because you kept giving me codeine. I remember him in the bed with me, and you had just given me codeine, and I had got him in the bed, and I was laying by a windowsill, and he was in the bed with me, and you had just given me codeine, and I didn't go to the parade that day because I was too weak to go, because you had been giving me codeine. You knew it made me throw up, and you gave it to me anyway. Why'd you stop? Were people asking questions? I'm also talking to you for all of it, I know. Oh, how convenient. You don't remember.
So here she's caught in another lie. Because when I first, at the beginning of the question, asked her about the codeine, she immediately said, oh, well, I was giving you Tylenol. But then she slips, contradicts herself, and starts talking about the fact that she gave me codeine. And now, all of a sudden, she's got amnesia, and she can't remember a damn thing.
You were the parent. You were the one giving me the codeine. You don't remember. I remember how sick it made me, and you kept giving it to me. I remember that. It's very convenient. You don't remember. You also not remember shutting me up in your apartment this year and not letting me out. You also remember the conversation where you admitted to doing that, and you admitted to telling me that you did it because you were trying to make me understand. What are you going to make someone understand if you shut them up in your home against their will? That's actually against the law. So is allowing someone to molest your child. So is also drugging your child. Don't have me arrested. Don't have you arrested. Why would you be so worried about that? Why would you be worried?
Don't have me arrested then.
Then why would you even be worried? If you don't remember any of that, why would you be concerned about being arrested?
I said, go have me arrested.
But why would you need to be if you don't even remember doing all of that?
Is that going to satisfy you? Is that going to make you feel better? To go have me arrested?
No, I'm just putting a mirror in front of your face. Because my entire life, all you've wanted to do is discredit me and tell people things about me that aren't true. But I got some things, and I'm sure if I could contact LSU and do enough digging, that I could probably find out what really went on when you were in the psychiatric hospital. And I could probably contact whoever I need to in Amarillo and do some digging.
So basically, as you can tell, my mother had no remorse for what she did. In fact, she was proud of what she got away with. She was proud of the fact that she got away with drugging her daughter so that her daughter could be sexually assaulted as a little girl by her father. Oh, and the sexual abuse did not end. The sexual abuse was going on after my father became employed under the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist denomination in Houston. And I know that they could say, well, see, you know, he wasn't employed under us, So that had nothing to do with us. Yeah, but you have a board of ordained ministry that these clergy have to go through. They have to go through extensive training. They have to go through years of seminary and extensive questioning. And apparently, the process that they go through is not enough to catch a predator before someone at one of the United Methodist churches under the Texas Annual Conference Administration is sexually assaulted.
And find out exactly why they thought I had been molested and why they thought you had, that the two of you had anything to do with it, because I know that's what happened. Even before, Grim, you were giving me medicine every single day. It wasn't because my legs were hurting. I remember that. My legs weren't hurting every night. You're making that up.
I remember giving you medicine, but I did not give you medicine every day.
You did, I remember.
Okay, all right. I'm glad you got a better memory.
It's very convenient that you don't remember. Do you not remember trying to say Alex has a lazy eye?
Okay.
Do you not remember trying to tell Carl and I he had the crooked leg? Do you not remember that?
Your lawyer and bring charges against me. If that's going to make you happy,
But
go
why would
right
I
ahead.
do that?
Well, you seem to want to be happy with it.
Seems to me you're scared.
I'm not scared. That's the reason why I said to go get your lawyer and bring charges against me. If that's going to make you happy, you go right ahead.
Seems to me you're
I
really
need
talking.
help with my medicine anyway. They'll put me in jail, and they can provide my medicine for me.
Do you think drugging your child is funny? Do you think drugging your child because you don't want her to know that your husband is molesting her? Do you think drugging your child because you want to make her sick? Did people start asking questions? Is that why you stopped? Because I know you just all of a sudden abruptly stopped. Why was that? Were people starting to...
Yeah, she wasn't prepared for that question, and of course she did not have an adequate response because they did abruptly stop. And I did wonder, and I'm really glad I got to ask her that question. Why did they stop? Who was asking questions? And what were they asking? Why is John and Grace's daughter so sick all the time? Why is she so lethargic? Why can't she keep anything down? Something is off there. What is it? I actually spoke with somebody that year that knew me at that time. She said they knew something was off, but they didn't know what it was. So I told her. I told her what was going on at the time, and she was heartbroken. I'm not here to protect anybody from what happened to me. I am here to tell my story and share what I went through. I am not here to protect anyone from the shock or the sadness of knowing what I went through.
Ask, why is John and Grace's daughter so sick? You had just moved to Groom, and then all of a sudden one day you stopped giving me codeine. I don't remember what day, but I know you stopped. Why did you stop? Somebody had to have said something. Somebody had to have started asking questions, because you couldn't keep drugging me with codeine, could you?
Terry, you just had that surgery.
No, I don't.
Oh, yes, I did. I did have surgery. So, just to give you an idea of the medical trauma I went through. The first time a speculum was used on me, I was in the first grade. I had to go to school with panty liners, which no first grader should ever have to go through. No one explained anything to me. And because everybody had their heads up their asses to actually explain to me what was going on and actually explain to me that I was not a bad person because of what was happening to me. And experiencing what a speculum is like in the first grade at that age is absolutely horrific. I mean, a Valium would have been a godsend during that time. And that was a humiliating night, actually. Later that night, I was also humiliated in front of a nurse and my mother. And I hope they had a good laugh because they were laughing. And I did have surgery and I had complications, which is what led up to that speculum. And my mother told me years ago, but I never saw proof. I never saw the medical records. What I think happened was a result of physiological damage that was caused from sexual abuse from my father during the times that I was sedated so that I would not know what was going on. It makes sense to me. And that is horrific for any child to go through. It really is. And, you know, it makes me wonder if the Texas Annual Conference Administration is proud of having multiple child predators employed under their administration. Of course, they're not now, but if they've already employed child molesters in the past, what makes you think that they won't do it again? And the reason why they can get away with it is because it's a multi-billion-dollar administration. I paid attention growing up. I grew up around old men in suits. I listened to them. I listened to clergy. I listened to them speak at annual conference, and I paid attention to the policies. And I don't think that they expected that. And most of their policies are just basically to protect them from liabilities. And the policies, they say the policies are basically to protect everyone, but they're not. It's really just to protect them. And what I mean by that is, let's say, somebody like myself wants to come forward and report a United Methodist minister to the bishop. And you meet with the bishop, or I met with the bishop, and someone employed under the conference administration sits there with me under the guise that they're there to support me, when really they're not. They're just there to make sure that they are upholding the Safe Sanctuary policy, to protect themselves. It wasn't to protect me. It wasn't to validate me. It was about damage control. And during the time I met with Bishop Huey, unfortunately, I was not ready to talk about my parents drugging me. I didn't have this recording. I wish I had had this recording before my father passed away, because I would have loved to have seen the look on his face. But because of my self-control, I did not want to face my father in person, because I had too much rage and I wasn't going to let him win, and I wasn't going to let my mother win.
Gonna make you happy? You go right ahead. Okay.
She was boastful and telling me to go press charges against her because she didn't know I was recording her. She didn't think anybody would believe me. And at this point, I could care less who believes me. I know what happened. And I have the recordings. And I am proud of myself for facing her.
Driving me with codeine, could you?
Carrie, you just had that surgery.
No. I don't have enough. The codeine made me sick. You knew I was very sick from that codeine. You knew that, and you kept giving it to me.
All right.
You
All
knew.
right. Okay. I said,
And honestly, someone who is very sick do that to their child.
go get your lawyer and bring charges against me.
Oh, believe me. That sounds like a great idea.
All right, you go
I
ahead
would
and
be
do
more
that.
than happy to do that. Fortunately for you, there's this thing
Oh,
called
okay.
statute of limitation. But you know what? Ellie, that's not.
I've got things I've got to do, so this stuff's not going on. No.
Maybe
I'm
you can
tired
find
of it.
another. Try anything with my kids, like what you did to me. Did you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I hear you.
Because I will file charges against you.
You go right ahead. Don't wait on that. Go ahead. Go put
Oh,
an
I
ad
will be more than happy to. I'll contact my
Go put an ad in the Houston Chronicle, okay? Go put an ad in the Houston Chronicle telling everybody what I did. Okay?
No problem. I have no problem doing that. You seem so eager for everybody to know.
Go take
Leave
an
Alex
ad.
alone and stop asking him about me. Leave me alone. Stay out of my life. Leave my kids alone. Do not give my kids anything.
Do not what?
Do not give my kids anything. Stay away from my kids. Leave them alone.
What have I given them?
Leave my kids alone. Stay away from them.
All right, all right. I hear you, Kay.
I will contact my lawyer, and I will look into that. Fortunately for you, there's probably a statute of limitations. And fortunate for you, I can't really prove that you did what you did, but I know you did. I remember, and I will never forget. Ever. And it's unfortunate for you that I finally remembered and figured out what you were doing. And that you were just as sick and twisted as he was. You're no different.
Okay.
Any mother that drugs her child is a sick person. And you stay out of my life and you leave.
So when I am saying to my mother that she is just as sick and twisted as he was, I am referring to my father. And what is just as sick and twisted is the history of the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Denomination in Houston having a history of employing Methodist ministers and spouses with their spouses who are capable of grooming young, innocent girls because they need a willing participant for their sexual assault and child abuse. And there is unfortunately a huge oversight in the process that the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Denomination in Houston, Texas goes through in employing clergy. And they have had 3 United Methodist ministers that have been indicted for crime. The most well-known United Methodist clergy that was indicted was Kirby John Caldwell. But that was for fraud. That wasn't for child abuse. So clearly, the Texas Annual Conference can publicly be associated with him, despite the fact that he served time in prison. They just don't want you to know their history of employing sexual predators. And one of those sexual predators was a United Methodist minister who murdered his wife in Troop, Texas. And his name was Michael Tabb, and he was sentenced to 55 years in prison. And unfortunately, Marla Tabb is not alive today to tell her story. And Marla Tabb is part of the reason why I am adamant in telling my story. And along with, as if it wasn't enough that the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Denomination, if it wasn't enough that they have a history of employing child molesters and placing them on assignment at their churches, they're also involved with the Domestic Relations Office in Harris County. And they are allowing the Domestic Relations Office to use 2 of their churches as visitation sites, Sunset United Methodist Church and St. Stephen's United Methodist Church. I haven't seen my sons in a year. And I was kicked out of the supervised visitation because I was not okay with visiting our sons at a United Methodist Church that was under the same administration that employed my father, who sexually assaulted me as a child, even if the Texas Annual Conference felt I deserved it. And I also was not okay with being sexually harassed at these visitations by an employee of the Domestic Relations Office on the campus of South Main Baptist Church. And his name was Jorge. I like to call him Pornhay because he was a fucking creep. And I was not okay with being sexually harassed by a guy named Shane, who was coming on to me at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church. And the staffs of St. Stephen's United Methodist Church witnessed it and did nothing. And the Domestic Relations Office staff witnessed it and did nothing. I mean, you know, if that was the case, the Texas Annual Conference could have just told them to take me into a room and have at it and have their way with me. At least I could still see my kids. I just didn't think I needed to be sexually harassed in front of our sons. Even if the Texas Annual Conference felt I deserved it, and even if the Texas Annual Conference wanted my sons to see that. Not only was I sexually harassed, but myself, along with multiple parents, are followed to the restroom. they would listen to us urinate or have a bowel movement on the toilet. I was placed in supervised visitation because my ex-husband made false accusations against me. I guess that was my fault too, right? Because I guess I'm responsible for what everybody does. I have made my own mistakes, but I've never been arrested. I don't have a history of arrests. I have never been convicted of a crime. I have never served time in a correctional facility. And I was forced into the supervised visitation. And for months I was forced to visit my kids at a United Methodist Church that was under the same administration of the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Denomination. I guess I should have kept my damn mouth shut and learned my damn lesson. Shame on me for exposing their history. But, I mean, I could see my kids again, and if the Texas Annual Conference wanted to, they could have their staff take me in a separate room and sexually harass me. Just not in front of our sons, who were minors. I mean, that's all I ask. But now that I haven't seen our sons in a year since then, our oldest son has told his 10-year-old brother that he wants him to die. So, you know, what I would love to know is if the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Denomination, did they accomplish what they were hoping to accomplish? That's what I want to know. Did they get what they wanted? Was their revenge adequate? That's what I want to know.
My kids alone. And if you think I don't have a recording of you admitting to shutting me up in your apartment, I do. I do have that. And believe me, I won't hesitate to use it. So leave me alone.
Go ahead. Whatever you gotta do.
Stay away from me. Stay away from my kids. Leave them alone. Stay out of this. And stop meddling in my life. My personal life is none of your business. Stop telling me I am sick, that I need help, that I'm going to lose everything, because I haven't.
Actually, I did lose everything. And I lost custody of our sons. Now I cannot see our sons because I was not okay with being sexually harassed in front of them. And I was not okay with visiting our sons at a United Methodist Church that was under the Texas Annual Conference Administration that employed my father, John Chester Dowden, who was a child molester. And, I mean, you know, if the Texas Annual Conference is so into violating women and children, they could have just let me, I'll go back and visit my kids at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church, and the Texas Annual Conference can have their staff at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church take me back into a room, and they can have their way with me, just not in front of our sons who are minors. That's all I ask. I had a conversation with Elijah Stansel during the time I was visiting our sons at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church in Houston. And there had actually been a parent who showed up with a knife. And he was allowed to be a repeat offender because he was allowed to come back and visit his kids. Eventually he was kicked out. But, you know, I am so flattered to be grouped in with somebody that would bring a knife to a church when I am a survivor of sexual assault and I am forced to visit my kids while I'm having to tolerate sexual harassment. I spoke with Elijah Stanzel and he told me, he was adamant that that was against the safe sanctuary policy. They have a big sign that no one is allowed to bring a weapon to a church. And a parent, a visiting parent, was allowed to be a repeat offender, and he was allowed to come back and visit at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church. So what do? I call the Texas Annual Conference administration. And I tell them that a parent who was a repeat offender was allowed to come back and visit after he brought a knife to the visitation. I also told Elijah Stanzel about the parents who were followed to the restrooms and how they would listen to us urinate and have a bowel movement on a toilet. I mean, what they should do is allow the bishop and the cabinet to listen, since, you know, they're into that type of thing, I guess. They can listen to me on the toilet if they want, if that's just so interesting to them. I've already been sexually assaulted countless times. God only knows how many times I was sexually assaulted by my father, John Chester Dowden, who was employed by the Texas Annual Conference Administration with the United Methodist denomination in Houston. I guess I should have learned my lesson and kept my damn mouth shut. But like I said, no child should have to witness their mother be sexually harassed right in front of them. And after all, my kids didn't do anything. They didn't ask to be born into any of this. They had nothing to do with the abuse that I went through. But they've been punished just as much as I have. By Carl Edward Anthony, they've been punished by the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist denomination in Houston. They've been punished by the family court system. I had to go before Judge Charlie Prime, who had a history of giving fathers custody because he hated women. I was warned by multiple attorneys. I was warned by Harrison Fisher. I was warned by another attorney. And when I went before Charlie Prime, I knew I was probably going to lose everything. And what was my punishment? My punishment was to visit my kids at a United Methodist church that was under the same administration that employed my father, who molested me as a child, who groomed me, who was employed under the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist denomination. So what is the lesson in that? I would love to know. What exactly is the lesson that the Texas Annual Conference Administration and St. Stephen's United Methodist Church were wanting to teach me? Shut the hell up if you've been sexually assaulted by a United Methodist clergy, or we'll make your life hell and you won't ever see your kids. Because there's many parents who are afraid to speak up about the domestic relations office also. And I told parents about the Methodist Church, and I told parents about the history of the Texas Annual Conference employing child molesters. But they were too afraid to speak up. I consulted with 2 different executive assistants for Glory Allred. But unfortunately these days, sexual assault has to be a profitable business. And my story was not profitable enough. And the victims of Harvey Weinstein took precedence over the fact that I was sexually assaulted by a United Methodist minister that was employed under a multi-billion-dollar administration and later was forced to visit my kids at a United Methodist church that was under that same multi-billion-dollar administration. Boy, I guess I should have learned my lesson. But I still haven't, because I'm still talking about it. I know that every time I talk to my kids, I may never see them again. And that phone conversation may be the last time I ever hear their voice, because they're with a man that has a history of physically abusing them. He physically abused me. He put bruises on me. And now I have a son who's been hospitalized 7 times, has a triple diagnosis, psychiatric diagnosis. And repeatedly he's told his 10-year-old brother that he wants him to die a slow and painful death. So is this what the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Denomination was hoping to accomplish? Was this the punishment you wanted to put me through, where one of my sons had to live in fear for his life? Is that what you wanted? Because that's what's happening. Because his brother wants him to die. And to, make things worse, their father, Carl, took Kevin to a gun range to teach him how to use a gun at the age of 10, which is too young. And this is just me, but perhaps the priority should have been to go to our 16-year-old psychiatric treatment. And he didn't do it.
And I won't. I'm doing a lot better than you are. But I will not let you do the things that you used to do to me anymore. I won't. I will not let you hurt me anymore. You obviously think this is a joke, and you obviously think this is funny, and that you can't be touched, and you can be cocky and tell me to just send you to jail. But believe me, if I could, I would in a second send you to jail for the things you did. No problem with that. I would love more than anything than to be able to press charges against you for the things that you did. And if there were not a statute of limitation, I would press charges and I would make sure you stay in prison for the rest of your life. No doubt about it. It would be my pleasure to file charges against you for what you did to me growing up.
There's something else I would like to add. Let me bring it up. And this is what Harrison Fisher wrote to Bishop Huey in 2011. This was 1 year after I met with Bishop Huey about my father. This office has been retained by Alicia Provost Graham regarding the above-mentioned incident. She relates the following events upon information and belief. When she was 9 years old, her mother died. She, along with her 7 siblings, was cared for by their maternal grandmother. During this time, the biological father was in prison as a result of a drug conviction. Her grandmother was a member of St. Paul United Methodist Church in Port Arthur, Texas. Miss Provost, along with her other siblings, attended St. Paul with her grandmother. Pastor Kendall Graham was appointed to St. Paul United Methodist Church. He began counseling Miss Provost at approximately the tender age of 10. Pastor Graham became a confidant for her and told her that he and his wife wanted her to come and live with them, and they wanted to adopt her. No United Methodist minister, and not anyone in a leadership role, should ever become a personal confidant to a minor. That is unethical and immoral, and it is a major imbalance of power. I was pursued by a United Methodist minister. She pursued a friendship with me. Her name was Diane. I was 15 at the time. She was 33. It was not sexual, but it was a huge imbalance of power. And she had no business as a United Methodist minister pursuing a friendship with me. Miss Provost, at approximately Pastor Graham became a confidant for her and told her that he and his wife wanted her to come and live with them, and they wanted to adopt her. This paperwork was slipped into my paperwork by Harrison Fisher, who represented Alicia Provost. The reason why I think, allegedly, it was slipped into my paperwork, and along with the fact that Harrison Fisher was in poor health at the time, despite the fact that he wanted to attack my mental health. This paperwork was slipped into my paperwork because of the commonality. My mother assisted my father in grooming me. My mother assisted my father in drugging me so that he could sexually assault me as a minor. And what is in common with her story is that Kendall Graham's wife assisted Kendall Graham in luring her into their home and assisting him in grooming her so that he could be successful in sexually assaulting her and impregnating her. The Texas Annual Conference settled with her out of court. And the article, it was supposedly $25 million, but I don't think it was quite that much. In this letter, Harrison Fisher it's a demand letter demanding $1 million up front from the Texas Annual Conference. And this was addressed to Bishop Janice Riggle Huey, who was the bishop at the time in 2011. Pastor Graham adopted Alicia Provost, married her, all while he was employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration, and got her pregnant. And she was a minor. And he was married. Pastor Graham was appointed to a church in Huntsville, Texas, where she would go and visit from time to time. Finally, she agreed to come live with Pastor Graham and his wife in Huntsville, with the happy thought that she would be adopted by a loving family who was involved with the Texas Annual Conference. During her stay in Huntsville, Texas is when the abuse began. She relates that Pastor Graham began to have sexual intercourse with her at the age of 14. This is somebody who was employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration of the United Methodist denomination in Houston, Texas. And I had this information before I was forced to visit our sons at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church in Houston during my supervised visitation. Isn't that convenient? And, you know, since parents are forced to visit their kids at a United Methodist Church under the supervised visitation, that is under an administration that has a history of employing child molesters, how do we know that there aren't child predators employed by St. Stephen's, employed on the staff of St. Stephen's? How do we know that the pastor appointed on assignment at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church isn't a child predator? Because clearly the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist denomination has gotten away with it more than once.